This section that we are entering into is definitely one of the most important sections because in order to teach the Yamadutas in the matter of the religious principles, Yamaraj, who is one of the 12 mahajanas, he establishes himself to be one of the 12 mahajans, and at the same time brings out what is the highest principle of religion. And you can see that the discussion will end up glorifying the holy name of the Supreme Lord. So far, what Yamaraj had covered is establishing the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and pointing out that indeed Vishnu Dutas have the right to do whatever they had done because they are accountable to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. And therefore, whatever they have decided is the best thing. And in the previous section, the the 3 points that got established is that indeed there is a supreme controller. Unfortunately, that's not me. That's the first point that Yamaraj establishes. Secondly, he establishes that yes, the Supreme Lord Vishnu is the supreme controller and he controls the human society through the Varnashrama system. And not only that Supreme Lord remains unknowable, even his messengers or the Vishnu Dutas, they are also unknowable. So after um, establishing their supremacy, now the focus goes into addressing the question that Yamadutas brought up, that isn't this a big breach in religious principles that we have already ascertained that this sinful Ajamil should be taken to hell, and then we got interjected. And therefore, Yamaraj is now going to teach what is the real form of religion. How do you define religion? Because there are many definitions of piety, many definitions of sin, and so they bewilder common people. So 19th verse defines what is religion. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. That religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So just like we established that there is only one Supreme Lord, therefore we should know that the religious principles are meant to be enacted by that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So although fully situated in the mode of goodness, even great rishis who occupy the topmost planets cannot ascertain the religious principles, nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddhalok, to say nothing of the asuras, ordinary human beings, Vidyadharas, and Charanas. So the laws of God are essentially the religious principles. We cannot create laws. We cannot come out come out with our own self-concocted ideologies and call it religion. We can't do that. So Prabhupada writes in the 19th purport, distinguishing between the high-grade goodness sort of religious principles versus those that belong to the transcendental goodness. So Prabhupada writes, when challenged by the Vishnudutas to describe the principles of religion, the Yamadutas said, Veda pranihito dharma. The religious principles are the principles enacted in the Vedic literature. They did not know, however, that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that are not transcendental, but are meant to keep peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. So you can see the distinction between the two definitions that came out. So from Yamaduta's standpoint, the definition is Veda Pranihita Dharma. Like in other words, whatever is enacted by the Vedic literature, that is Dharma. But what Prabhupada is helping us understand that yes, that may be called a Dharma, but that is not transcendental. that is just meant for keeping peace and order among materialistic persons in the material world. So we have to go deeper. Real religious principles are nistragurnya. And this term is also coming from the Bhagavad Gita second chapter, nistragurnya bhava. That's what Krishna teaches Arjuna. So become transcendental to the three modes of material nature. So likewise here, real religious principles are nistragurnya, above the three modes of material nature or transcendental. The Yamadutas did not know these transcendental religious principles, and therefore, when prevented from arresting Ajamil, they were surprised. Materialistic persons who attached all their faith to the Vedic rituals are described in Bhagavad Gita 2.42, wherein Krishna says, Vedavada Radha Partha Nanyadasti iti Vadinaha. The rituals, sorry, the supposed followers of the Vedas say that there is nothing beyond the Vedic ceremonies. Indeed, there is a group of men in India who are very fond of the Vedic rituals, not understanding the meaning of these rituals, which are intended to elevate one gradually to the transcendental platform of knowing Krishna. Vedasya sarver ahameva vedyo. Those who do not know this principle but who simply attach their faith to the Vedic rituals are called Vedavada Rataha. Herein it is stated that the real religious principle is that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, what is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Well, Bhagavad Gita is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, all we have to do is pay heed to the message of the Bhagavad Gita and we get the real religious principles. So, that principle is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. One should give up all other duties and surrender under the lotus feet of Krishna. That is the real religious principle everyone should follow. Even though one follows Vedic scriptures, one may not know this transcendental principle, for it is not known to everyone. To say nothing of human beings, even the demigods in the upper planetary systems are unaware of it. This transcendental religious principle must be understood from the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly or from his special representative as stated in the next verses. Because the next verse is now going to bring about from whom can we know about these real religious principles. So Yamarāja is pointing out that we should receive and understand these true religious principles which are enunciated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead through designated authorities. And he names here 12 of those authorities, the 12 mahajanas. So Lord Brahma, Bhagavan Narada, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, Lord Kapila who is the son of Devahuti, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, and I myself, so I myself is Yamaraj, know the real religious principle. So these 12 Mahajans, they are the ones that we have to go to figure out what is Dharma. And therefore, in Mahabharata also it is said that Mahajano Yena Gata Sapantaha, that one should figure out one's ways by following the lead of these Mahajans, these 12 Mahajans, or 12 great souls. And then Yamaraj says that, my dear servants, this transcendental religious principle, which is known as Bhagavad Dharma. And what is Bhagavad Dharma? Surrender unto the Supreme Lord and love for Him is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. So clearly you can see Yamaraj is bringing a distinction between the mundane dharma, or that which is meant for just bringing order in the materialistic society, versus transcendental dharma, that which is meant for our ultimate perfection of human life. And Yamaraj is basically pointing out that the ultimate dharma is transcendental dharma. And it is very confidential and difficult for ordinary human beings to understand. But if by chance one fortunately understands it, he is immediately liberated, and thus he returns home back to Godhead. So this is the goal of dharma. The goal of real dharma is not to have a good materialistic life, but the goal of real dharma is to return home back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada writes in this particular purport that in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna refers to Bhagavad Dharma as the most confidential religious principle. Sarva guyatamam guyad guyataram. Krishna says to Arjuna, because you are my very dear friend, I am explaining to you the most confidential religion. And what is that? Sarva dharman parityaja mamikam sharanam vraja. So that was basically 18.64. And after Krishna says 18.64, that I am now going to tell you again what is the most confidential religious principle, then Krishna speaks this, the two verses, 18.65 and 66. So this is the 66th verse. The Sarvadharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. Give up all other duties and surrender unto me. One may ask, if this principle is very rarely understood, what is the use of it? In answer, Yamarāja states herein that this religious principle is understandable if one follows the parampara system of Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, and other standard authorities. So, in other words, there are four basic um, authorized disciplic successions, which are rooted in Brahma, Lord Shiva, four Kumaras, and Lakshmi Devi. And these are four lines of disciplic succession, one from Lord Brahma, one from Lord Shiva, one from Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, and one from the Kumaras. The disciplic succession from Lord Brahma is called the Brahma Sampradaya. So the knowledge that we are receiving is from Brahma Sampradaya. The succession from Lord Shiva or Shambhu is called the Rudra Sampradaya. The one from the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi ji, is called the Sri Sampradaya, also known as the Sri Vaishnavas. And the one from the Kumaras is called the Kumar Sampradaya. One must take shelter of one of these four Sampradayas in order to understand the most confidential religious system. In the Padma Purana, it is stated, Sampradaya Vihina ye mantraste nishphalamataha. If one does not follow the four recognized disciplic successions, his mantra or initiation is useless. In the present day, there are many asampradayas or sampradayas which are not bona fide, which have no link to authorities like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the Kumaras, or Lakshmi. People are misguided by such sampradayas. The Shastras say that being initiated in such a sampradaya is a useless waste of time, for it will never enable one to understand the real religious principles. And finally, in 22nd verse, really, Yamaraj gives what is that is to be considered as the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. This verse is the pinnacle verse in this whole description. Etavan eva loke asmin punsam dharma para smrita bhakti yoga bhagavati tan nama granadivihi. The devotional service beginning with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. So all the important verses they are concentrated together in this section. The first verse established what is dharma. So dharma is that is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then it establishes how do we know about them. We know about them through the 12 mahajanas. The 12 mahajanas are described. And then the distinction between the transcendental dharma and the mundane dharma is brought out. And then finally, Yamaraj is giving it away that ultimately what matters is that are we holding on to the chanting of the holy name of the Lord? Because that is the ultimate religious principle for all of humanity. So Prabhupada writes in the purport 22, as stated in the previous verse, Dharmam Bhagavatam, real religious principles are Bhagavad Dharma, the principles described in Srimad Bhagavatam itself or in Bhagavad Gita, the preliminary study of the Bhagavatam. So note that Bhagavad Gita is considered to be the preliminary study of the Bhagavatam. What are these principles? The Bhagavatam says, Dharma projita kaitavo atra. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there are no cheating religious systems. Everything in the Bhagavatam is directly connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam further says, Savai punsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adhokshade. The supreme religion is that which teaches its followers how to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the reach of experimental knowledge. Such a religious system begins with Tannama Grina, chanting the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam. So you can see Srila Prabhupada is tying the message so beautifully. Like in the first canto also, uh, the highest occupational duty or the highest dharma is brought out, that by which one can develop love for the Supreme Lord. And if you tie that up with today's verse, you can see ultimately what is that? It is through the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra or chanting the holy name of the Lord. If you combine the two, then you can see that through the chanting, one can essentially develop love for the Supreme Lord. So after chanting the holy name of the Lord and dancing in ecstasy, one gradually sees the form of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, and the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So essentially what Prabhupada is pointing out, the Nama Rupa Guna Lila, the sequence in which the realizations progress is first the holy name. First we bring our concentration to the chanting of the holy name. And then from there, Rupa, Guna, Lila, the form of the Supreme Lord is revealed. The pastimes of the Supreme Lord is revealed. And the qualities of the Supreme Lord, they are revealed. This way, one fully understands the situation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can come to this understanding of the Lord, how he descends into the material world, how he takes his births, and what activities he performs. And but one can know this only by executing devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya Mam Avijanati. Simply by devotional service, one can understand everything about the Supreme Lord. If one fortunately understands the Supreme Lord in this way, the result is Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma Na Eti. After giving up this material body, he no longer has to take birth in this material world. So, this is the transcendental result of following a transcendental dharma. So, please understand that the chanting of the holy name is not a mundane dharma. It's not a ritual. It's a transcendental dharma. And therefore, it has got transcendental results. Instead, he returns home back to Godhead. That is the ultimate perfection. And therefore, Krishna had stated in the 8th chapter, Mam Upetya Punarjanma Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam Na Apnuvanti Mahatmana Sansiddhim Paramam Gata. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this material world, which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. Let's just quickly see what Srila Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has to say on this very important verse, this 22nd verse. So Jiva Goswami actually cites this particular text in the Anuched 92 of his Bhakti Sandarbha. He explains there that the bhakti and nothing else is the greatest dharma for all human beings. Chanting the holy names is the direct practice of bhakti. And here, please note the word eva that is appearing. Etavan eva. So Sri Jiva Goswami points out that the word eva means only. He writes, decisively rejects all other methods. If these bhakti practices are used for producing good qualities in karma or other processes, they are no longer the supreme dharma or dharma paraha. Since one commits an offense by using bhakti to achieve insignificant material gains, even though bhakti can, by its nature, also avoid temporary material results. Therefore, this etavan eva lokes, means the eva is very significant. That actually points out that there is nothing, there is no other process that can come even remotely close to the chanting of the holy names. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur notes in the context of this verse that Bhakti Yoga unmixed with the three modes is the Bhagavatam's Abhideya Tattva. Abhideya means the process. Generally, the entire Vedic scripture can be summarized in three sort of, you can say, keywords that Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha is understanding the relationship aspect. How are we related to the Supreme Lord, and how there is relationship between the Supreme Lord and everything that exists. So the understanding the relationship part. And once we understand the relationship, then the next step is that we follow a process so that we can strengthen that relationship. And that is the Abhideya. And when we strengthen that relationship, that leads to Prayojana, which is the ultimate result, that is love of God. So abhideya, so this bhakti yoga, when it is unmixed with the three modes, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that that is Bhagavatam's abhideya tattva, or that is the process. That is unmixed bhakti, not mixed bhakti, awards prema bhakti. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur then cites two Bhagavatam texts that propound pure bhakti. So one is the second verse of the Bhagavatam, first canto, Dharma projita kaitavatra parama nirmatsaranam satam. So that particular verse, the highest dharma rejects cheating dharma. And the second verse that he quotes is the 1.2.6, which is the definition of the highest occupational duty for all human being, that savai punsam paro dharma. So that particular verse, where bhakti yoga is established to be the supreme dharma for humanity. So by citing these two, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that this particular verse is bringing out bhakti yoga that is unmixed with the three modes, and the best expression of that is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. So please definitely meditate, contemplate on what we read today, because this is definitely the pinnacle point of the discussion that is going on between the Yamadutas and Yamaraj, and Yamaraj is really giving the essence here. So thank you very much. We'll continue.